Skydiving, Sexual Orientation and Justice, the case that redefined workplace equality. Welcome to HR Insider. Here we share career stories, relatable HR advice, and insight to help you navigate the workplace with confidence. With years of experience as a legal and HR professional, my mission is to use this platform to empower you with the knowledge to understand your rights, workplace dynamics, and make informed career decisions. The content shared on this channel is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional legal advice. Always consult with a qualified attorney or HR professional for specific guidance on your situation. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your experiences with HR in the comments. Hi, I'm Harlow Reed, creator of the HR Insider. Welcome to another episode in our When to Contact HR series, where we explore the really important moments when turning to HR can make all the difference in your workplace experience and even your career. In today's video, we're diving into a landmark case, Altitude Express v. Zarda. This case highlights the serious consequences of HR's inaction and provides really important lessons for employees as well. We're going to review what you should expect from HR departments when if you should face similar situations. By examining what happened in Altitude Express v. Zarda, what the Supreme Court decided, and how it could have been handled differently, we'll uncover some really good action items and insights to help you navigate workplace challenges with confidence. So this story begins in 2010 with Donald Zarda, who was an employee at Altitude Express. He was working as a skydiving instructor. And as part of his job, he often worked in close proximity with female clients during tandem skydives. And so a tandem skydive is where the instructor is tied to the back of the client so that the instructor can, deploy the parachute and really just supervise the jump, usually jumping with someone who is not as skilled. So he is supervising the jump in his role. And because he was working in close proximity with women, he made a statement about his sexual orientation to really help try to make them more comfortable, because sometimes the female clients he thought felt uncomfortable being so close to a man. And so oftentimes if the female client came in, especially if she was with her boyfriend or husband, he would say to her, "Hey, I am gay. I just want to make you aware of this," and sort of had a habit of doing this. It was his way of minimizing any awkwardness that might come out of the fact that he was strapped so closely, so tightly to women. Well, when in 2010, uh, a lady named Rosanna Arilana and her boyfriend David Kingle, they both went to Altitude Express and purchased two tandem skydives where Zarda was going to be the instructor of Rosanna Arilana. And so he did the jump, and during the jump, or during his time of preparing for the jump, he disclosed to Orellana, which was his kind of standard practice. He did share that he was gay. And so, again, this was his way of making his clients feel comfortable. So they went through, they had the jump, and everything went fine, not an issue. But at some point later that day, when Orellana and her boyfriend David were exchanging, talking about their experiences jumping, just kind of comparing notes, David Kingle, who was Orellana's boyfriend, learned that Zarda had disclosed his sexual orientation, and Kingle was not happy about it, and he ended up calling Altitude Express to complain about Zarda's behavior. And it was at that moment that Zarda was terminated. He was just immediately terminated shortly after David Kingle made that phone call. And so, what he alleged to Human Resources is that he did not feel Donald Zarda alleged that he didn't feel that his termination was fair. He said, "Hey, I'm being terminated because I am gay, and not because of any other reason." And Human Resources said, "No, you are not able to provide a satisfactory experience for people who come in for the skydives, and as a result of that, we are terminating your employment." And he said, "Well, how is it that I'm not able to provide an enjoyable experience when I haven't had any complaints about the jump itself? All of the complaints have been about this comment that was made, and now I'm being terminated shortly after you were notified by a client that I made this comment." And so he also alleged, in order to substantiate his claims, he said there was another employee who was homosexual who also, uh, I'm sorry, there was another employee who was heterosexual who disclosed that what his sexuality was, and nothing happened to him, because at some point HR had said, it's just not appropriate for you to be talking about, your sexuality and all of those things during a jump. And he said, well, this other skydiver disclosed his heterosexuality and no one held him accountable for anything. And so he was trying to use that um, to demonstrate, that, to substantiate that discrimination had taken place. And so the HR department said, well, you know what, we've had other complaints about you anyway. And so, we're just going to terminate your employment. And so that is what led to this particular case. Now, one thing I want to mention here is that when Zarda made the claim that he said, "Hey, I think I'm being terminated because of my sexual orientation," at that moment, it would have been good for HR to look into his complaint and consider his complaint. But more importantly than that, the fact that he was terminated, there's something in the law called temporal proximity. So the time frame from which the claim is made and the action is taken against an employee, if the time is close enough, then there could be that could substantiate any allegation that's made by the employee. So those two things are important little facts here. The first one, that HR, didn't really pay much attention to him saying that he feels like the reason he's being terminated is for discriminatory reasons. And the second one being that they terminated him right after this complaint was made after about his sexual orientation. Human resources departments within organizations have a dual role. One is advocate and the other as protector, advocating for the employee while also protecting the organization. Um, and how do we do this? I mean, it is not easy, but it's a crucial, I think, one of the most important attributes of an effective HR leader. Because on one side, HR should be an advocate for employees by ensuring fair treatment, providing resources that those employees need, and also maintaining uh, an inclusive work environment. Employees often look to HR as a safe place to address workplace concerns, and they should have that expectation of human resources. It's a reasonable expectation that they should have and be able to go and receive consultation about any concerns that they have. And when that trust is breached, as it was in this case, um, the breach occurred when HR didn't take the complaint seriously. They didn't look into the concerns. There was just an immediate dismissal. And those types of actions can not only affect the employee, but it can also have far reaching implications on an organization, as it did in this case. But if you take anything from this video, I would say to remember that protecting an organization doesn't mean shielding it from accountability. The integrity, the ethics, the beliefs of that organization should be carried out. And if the uh, dysfunction exists to the point where the environment is not healthy and is toxic, then you may see some shielding from accountability. But if it's a healthy environment, the HR department is going to work to ensure that people feel valued, that there is trust, and that there is accountability. And they're going to look to build systems and processes that prevent legal disputes but also foster equity and make people feel like they have a recourse if some unhealthy things happen in the workplace. This doesn't mean that employees are going to be satisfied with every outcome. I mean, that expectation is unrealistic. But at least in the grand scheme of things, the HR department should be a viable resource for employees and a part of an organization that is viewed as someone who is trustworthy. Now, in this case, HR failed in both the advocacy and protector roles. First, they didn't postpone Donald's termination until his complaints of discrimination had been investigated. They terminated him immediately without discussing any kind of coaching. If the issue happened to be him disclosing his personal information, his sexual orientation, those are things where they should have had documentation that he was written up about. At one point in the story, Donald also disclosed to Orlana that he had just broken up with his boyfriend. So he didn't just disclose his orientation, he also disclosed some private, intimate information about his relationship with his boyfriend and that it didn't work out. And so these are things that people can be coached on, but there was no coaching, no counseling. It was just an immediate termination. So, in terms of advocacy for the employee, the HR department certainly did not fulfill its duty there. And as far as protector of the organization, it failed. The HR department failed there as well because there was no documentation. They didn't take Zarda's complaint seriously, his concerns, and the quick termination that occurred. There were very expensive settlement fees and high costs in legal proceedings because this case did go all the way to the Supreme Court. So the expenses associated with the litigation were excessive. In this case, Donald Zarda actually died in a skydiving accident before the case went to trial, and two executors of his estate replaced him as plaintiffs. So even after his death, the employer was obligated to continue its defense against Zarda's claim. So you can see the burden here is always on the employer to demonstrate that their actions are legitimate and that they're not for discriminatory reasons. And no matter what, they are going to have to contend with the claim, even if the person who originally brings the claim passes away. And so that's why it's so important for HR departments to document reasons for termination and have had discussions with the employee explaining why any changes are happening, whether it's a change in schedule, a change in a denial of training, anything that is something that is a no. It's basically a no in relationship to the employee employer relationship. HR needs to have documentation about why that no took place. But in this case, it's easy to assume that the HR department was working under a predetermined outcome, meaning they knew what they wanted to do, that they wanted to terminate Donald Zarda, and they possibly were waiting on an opportunity to do so. So, what are some of the things that employees can look for to help them understand what they should expect from HR departments when claims of discrimination or harassment are made? The first thing is taking the complaint seriously. How does HR demonstrate that they're taking it seriously? Well, they should handle any complaint from an from an employee with care. This means regardless of the perceived severity of the claim, they are promptly initiating a transparent investigation into any allegations of discrimination or harassment. They're doing that quickly, and they are being sensitive to the information that is shared by the employee. The second thing is to a thorough investigation is done. So if you see that before any big decisions are made, the HR department has investigated all aspects of a complaint. And what I mean by big decisions, I mean before a termination occurs, before a demotion occurs, something significant. Um, you know that if you have raised this type of claim, that HR has looked into it um, holistically. They've looked into the employment history and how that plays a role. They've looked into all aspects of the incident, that is being shared with them. They've looked into workplace dynamics in terms of relationships among employees. This demonstrates that they have taken the complaint seriously and also that they've conducted a thorough investigation. And the final thing is documentation. It's not just about what documentation HR has, because obviously employees are not always able to see all of the documentation that human resources has. But one of the things that they can have access to is what the conclusion of an investigation is. And that's the documentation that you should always receive from your HR department, is what was the outcome of the complaint that I made. If you're experiencing discrimination at work, it would be a good idea to take these steps at least to protect yourself. Keep detailed records of incidents, including dates, times, comments, and actions. Documentation is really important if you want to escalate your concerns to human resources or even outside the organization. Know your rights, understand how Title VII applies to you, know what the internal workplace policies are, and what federal protections would be applicable in whatever claim of discrimination you have. And finally, seek support. If HR isn't responsive, make sure that you talk with advocacy groups or legal professionals who can give you guidance on what next steps you can follow. If you want more tips on things you can do, check out my video, The Hidden Power of HR Complaints. How would you have handled this case differently as an HR professional or a leader in the organization? Share your thoughts and comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. Thanks for watching the HR Insider. I'm Harlow Reed, and I'll see you in the next video. If you found this helpful, like, subscribe, and share your experience with HR in the comments. And remember, every employee deserves to feel supported in their workplace.